Welcome back. This is part 2. Hope you all enjoy.
Harry Potter? No, it's Harry Strife. By Shinada 14, aka me. Cover made by Himiofshinus. Chapter 4. After they meet Hagrid in the main halls of Gringotts, Harry noticed that the half-giant did look a bit unwell. So, his father suggested to him that they should take a small break. But Hagrid wasn't having any of that and questioned them why they took 3 hours on getting back from the vaults. Harry had been utterly surprised that the ceremony took 3 hours long in total, though it felt like only 20 minutes had passed by. Thankful his father told him to lie about the head goblin wanting to talk about the Potter vaults, and Hagrid seemed to believe him. They headed get lunch since Harry was extremely hungry, and he felt like he hadn't had any food in days when he met a boy who was the same age as him, but looked very skittish on his way back to the Leaky Cauldron for lunch. The boy was a dark-haired blonde and had a darker shade of green eyes compared to himself. "Hello," Harry said as he decided to join the other boy, as his father and Hagrid want to get the three of them food, as well as send food up to Mr. Snape and Red. The boy let out a surprised squeak as he didn't notice the other get close to him at all. Hello," the boy said very nervously. "The name's Harry." He decided not to give him his last name. There were too many people who could overhear him and report back to the Hogwarts headmaster. "Neville?" the boy said slowly, getting slowly comfortable to Harry's presence. "You going to Hogwarts too?" "Yeah. Though I'd rather stay home and be with my father instead," Harry told him honestly. After saying this, Neville's interest peaked up. "Why?" Neville asked curiously. "I heard Hogwarts is a great place to go. Even my ma and dad went there when they were my age. Because I actually don't want to be surrounded by stress all the time by trying to learn a single spell, and I rather learn it in my own time," he told the other before rolling his eyes. "If they actually cared about us learning, why not start earlier? When we are more curious when we are younger, they could teach us all about the laws of magic and have us do very babyish spells to start out with. We should be learning all about the magical world so we'd know all about the dangers about it. Not to mention that people who were born with magic in families that haven't gotten any magic wouldn't get shunned at an early age by others who don't really understand them." Neville's eyes went wide as Harry ranted about the flaws of the wizarding community. "I never thought of it like that before." Neville was awestruck by Harry's little speech. "I had a few great teachers to learn the logic in certain situations." Harry grinned at him. "Anyways, I gotta go. My gran is probably searching for me." Neville smiled at Harry. "I hope to see you on the train." Neville then ran off to go find his gran, while Harry's father got his attention so he could eat his own full. After the three of them ate lunch, they went back into Diagon Alley. Hagrid slipped away from them as Harry and his father entered Madame Malkin's for robes, which both he and his father hated because you couldn't really fight hand-to-hand combat in them. After they left with several robes, they want to go get Harry's wand. Once they entered the store, a man in the far back yelled for them to wait for a moment, and Harry along with his father stood next to the main desk as the man come up to them with a happy glee in his eyes and waved a stick in hands, locking the door and closing the blinds so no one could walk in nor see what was going on within the inside of the wand shop. "Welcome to my humble shop, champion of the planet, and his chosen heir, formerly known as Mr. Potter by trade." The man smiled at the pair. "It's such a huge honor to be bestowed the grace of choosing to buy from my shop. I thought Harry already had a custom wand prepared." "Cloud?" Zach appeared in the shop right next to them. "Why come to a shop for another wand?" "Zach, we discussed this morning to wait until Cloud and Harry got into Hogwarts to pop up in front of the wizarding people." His very lovely Aunt Aerith appeared next to his uncle, scolding him. "Ollivander can keep us a secret." "That's not the point, Zach." "To answer your question, Zach," Harry's father began, "I do have a wand customly made with Aerith's help, but it would look way too suspicious if we don't get Ta wand the old man wants Harry to receive." "I see." The wizard spoke calmly with a smile before going to get a single wand off the many shelves before coming back with a wand box in hand. "You mean this wand? The twin wand to the one that gave him that scar. Holly and Phoenix Feather. 11 inches, nice and simple." When Harry was given the wand box, a warmth spread through his body. His father paid the men 20 golden coins, leaving the man with a generous tip, which Aunt Aerith and Uncle Zach felt was a bit much for his father pay for Harry's wand before they disappeared. When they exited the shop, Hagrid had been waiting with a beautiful snowy owl in a cage and gave the owl to Harry for a birthday present. Harry felt immediately attached to the snowy owl and he named her Hedwig. After getting many school books from Flourish and Blots, including a book about how to take care of his new owl friend, and they got his potion supplies last before they went back to the leaky cauldron with the supplies they had and planned on going around London tomorrow for other supplies that Diagon Alley didn't have. When they got back to their room, Mr. Snape and Hagrid left, and his father decided that they'd go through his books for the rest of the day until dinner time. Over the next few weeks, Harry and his father had fun during their time in London and obviously pulled many pranks on all the wizarding people in Diagon Alley just for fun. When Harry was finished studying all his books within 2 weeks, and Auntie Aerith helped him to memorize all the books. But soon it came to the day to finally head to the train station to get to platform 9 3/4. His father suggested Red wear the invisibility cloak the month before his birthday and was honestly happy about it, because that meant going around Hogwarts without being seen at all and being able to set up multiply pranks without being noticed by the headmaster, who would be his main target for his pranks and to people he didn't really like. His father had them up at 4 in the morning, so he'd get on top of the train without being noticed. Mr. Snape had minimized his father's bike so it could be carried around like a toy. Harry was used to getting up early, so it didn't bother him very much. When they reached the platform between 9 and 10, it appeared platform 9 3/4 didn't exist, but if they had learned, everything is not as it seemed to be. Red ran towards the pillar that had 9 and 10, and entered through, then came back to tell them that the platform was on the other side before going back through. His father grabbed onto him as they run right through, and once through they saw the train and the sign above them said platform 9 3/4. Not only that, they were the very first ones there, so his father helped him onto the train and let Harry choose whatever seat he wanted for himself and Red, while his father got on top of the train with the invisibility cloak on him. Auntie Aerith appeared in the compartment he had chosen, giving him his breakfast before anyone showed up, and gave him a healthy lunch for later, giving him a warning to not eat too many sweets on the way to Hogwarts before disappearing. Harry watched as the train station platform started to fill up with parents and kids alike. Red guarded his compartment, not letting anyone inside if he deemed them as threat. When he saw Neville, Harry got excited at seeing the other again and told Red to let him in, which the feline obeyed, backing away, allowing Neville inside. Neville smiled warily as he walked in with his own suitcase, being very wary of Red as he put the suitcase next to Harry's before sitting across from him. They talked a bit before they got a knock on the door to the compartment, and they turned to see a girl with long bushy hair and big buck teeth who looked really nervous holding her very own suitcase. Red let her in, seeing as she looked a lot like his Auntie Aerith if she had hair like that. "Can I sit with you?" she asked very nervously as she stood in the doorway. "As long as you allow me to do your hair, it's very gorgeous." Harry grinned at her and she nodded before joining the pair in the compartment. She handed Harry her hairbrush from her own suitcase before putting her suitcase away. She sat next to Harry so he could brush her hair, warning him that it would just get messy again. But he didn't care. "What houses do you think you'll get into?" she asked them after introducing herself as Hermione Granger, and Neville as well as himself did the same, though keeping his last name to himself. They both asked why he wouldn't tell them. He just told them he'd like to keep it a surprise for now. "I'm hoping to get into Gryffindor, since it sounds like the best, though Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. I hope I get in Gryffindor just like my parents did, though I feel like I'd be kicked out before I even started." Neville sighed as his eyes clouded with grief. "Why worry about the houses you'll get into?" Red spoke up, causing both Neville and Hermione to jump and squeak in surprise that an animal could talk. "Whatever you get, you should be happy with whatever you get placed in. What would you get out of it with the house you chose?" There was silence met with his question. Nothing more than slight satisfaction and not being able to grow past what that house can offer you. But the one that would suit you can help you succeed in the future with your goals towards what you want to be in life. "Red's right," Harry chimed in as he put Hermione's now bushed hair in a ponytail, then started braiding her hair. "I don't care what house I get, because at the end of the day they don't really matter at the end of the day, because my goal doesn't involve magic at all. But it would be helpful to ease daily tasks such as chores and to get the house cleaned quickly when you have people come over last minute. Magic can't help raising a child or an animal, nor can it help you get a job in a world without magic. Nor can it help the planet grow even farther than what it already is. My goal is to stay with my father for as long as possible, since he was always alone as a child, from the stories my aunt and uncle told me, and my second goal is to help the planet out just like my aunt, who does it on a daily basis. So, I don't really care about house titles and live the way I want to live my own life." After a while, Neville's toad Taver got out of the compartment and Hermione offered to go search for the toad along with Neville after Harry finished her hair. Harry stayed in the compartment so no one would try to steal their spot, which Harry was sure wouldn't happen anyway thanks to Red being there. But he stayed to ease his new friends' minds. As he sat there reading a book his dad bought him the day before and he was really enjoying the book, it was about a unicorn trying to find out where the rest of her kind went, when suddenly a lady with a big cart of sweets and a few healthy food items knocked on the door of the compartment. Harry gladly opened it and bought 3 of each item and got a water for Red. A few hours had passed by the time Neville and Hermione got back and he gave them their share of sweets he bought for them. The two of them talked about how everyone they met were like while looking for Trevor. Some were openly hostile to Hermione because she was born a witch in a non-magical family which Harry hated because they treated her in a terrible manner. The others they met were honestly nicer. A few of them were kind and some just didn't care to help the duo out. When it was time to change their clothes into their robes, Hermione left to go change with the other girls while the boys changed in the compartment, though it was just putting the robe over his own clothes. When Hermione came back, Harry was holding onto his Chocobo egg. Hermione did ask both of the boys where it had come from. Neville stayed silent while Harry just grinned, changing the subject, though he knew she was going to ask him again about it later, as the train stopped. They were told by a few older students to leave their stuff behind. It would be in their houses later that evening. Once the 4 of them got off the train, they heard Hagrid's voice calling for first years to follow him, which they did. Red stayed behind to wait for his father to get off the train's roof. Harry, Hermione, and Neville along with some kid with red hair who he honestly didn't like already as they rowed a boat together because the boy just kept bragging about his family and how his family were all Gryffindors and how he bragged that he would be friends with the famous Harry Potter once they reached Hogwarts. And Harry hated that the boy was clinging on to nothing but air, though soon enough they reached the castle grounds. Chapter 5. Harry was bored waiting for Miss McGonagall but was amused by the others' reaction to the ghost as they floated into the hall. They were waiting in. After a while, Miss McGonagall came and shooed the ghost away before making them all get in and follow after her, and they all entered a giant hall in 2 lines with so many older students watching them walk up them towards a wooden stool. Harry mildly was interested in the ceiling. It showed the night sky, and he did worry about the candles floating above everyone in the great hall, and wondered why no one was worrying about candle wax falling onto them. He watched as the elderly woman put a pointed wizard's hat upon the stool. It was torn up in a few areas and had a patch here and there, and it also looked extremely dirty. But his eyes widened as the hat started to sing. "I've been around a long time. Never have I seen such an odd sight. The blood of the champion runs through these halls, and it brings me such great happiness. For even the greatest of Gryffindors would be proud." Hufflepuff would sing out loud. "The wise Lady Ravenclaw would be put to shame. And old Slytherin would be pleased to be here. But enough of that. I'm only a mere sorting hat. Put me on. Don't be afraid. You're in safe hands, though I have none. For I'm a thinking cap." After the hat sang its song, he noticed that the old man in the middle of the table looked confused as well as a few others. Mr. Snape tried hard to hide his smirk while the rest of the hall started clapping after the song was finished, though it seemed like awkward clapping at best. Miss McGonagall started calling names after the clapping stopped. Afterwards, a few names were called. His friend Hermione was called and placed into Ravenclaw, and then it was Neville's turn, and he was put Hufflepuff. He assumed they took his and Red's words seriously about the houses, or those houses were chosen for them regardless. Then a cute pale blonde boy named Draco Malfoy was put in Slytherin, while the annoying red-headed boy whose name was Ronald Weasley went to Gryffindor along with a kid named Dudley Dursley, whose last name was the same as his Aunt Petunia, and figured this kid was his cousin. After a long time his old name was called Potter Harry. Harry had half a mind not to answer to his old name as everyone became quiet, and his name was the last name called out of all the kids. Instead of going towards the hat, he walked over to Miss McGonagall to correct her. "Excuse me, but Potter's not my last name anymore, ma'am." He spoke to her with a soft smile on his face. He could hear a few gasps from the older students. "Oh? Then what is your name now?" She smiled gently at him, proud to see bravery. But she obviously knew that his name was changed, but kept up the act of displeasure for his actions. Before he could say his last name, a mighty lion's roar was heard from the great hall's double doors, causing everyone to turn towards the doors to see a big red lion with a flaming tail running in, startling many of the students besides Harry's 2 friends. And a few had jaws dropped open in shock. "Red! What took you so long? Harry grinned, gaining the attention back on him but didn't pay it any mind at all. You know very well what took me so long. Red huffed as he reached Harry, and a few people were surprised to find that the big cat-like creature could talk like a human being. Even the other professors minus Hagrid, Mr. Snape, and Miss McGonagall. This must have gotten on the elderly man's nerves, who stood from the seat he was in and flicked his wand to send Red flying through the double doors, but Harry had grabbed a hold of Red's mane as soon as saw the man pull out his wand and flew out the door with Red. There was screams from the other students within the Great Hall as Harry went flying along with a few of the professors who were shocked by the elderly man's actions. But luckily for Harry and Red, his father had come in time, driving on his beloved motorcycle Fenrir, and fling his fusion sword at the main table, and it landed right in front of the man within the table, breaking it in half before his father jumped into the air, catching both him and Red, landing back on the ground on his 2 feet. His father's bike came to a stop in front of the stool where the hat resided upon. To say his father wasn't pissed off was a great understatement. Cloud was beyond pissed as held his son and Red in his arms. He glared darkly at Dumbledore, who had dared to cast a spell on his son and friend that sent them flying. The ghost around stared in surprise at him, most likely knowing who he was like the other mythical creatures. A ghost covered in blood was the only being to talk at this moment and was also glaring darkly at Dumbledore in pure disgust. How dare you, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, to cast a spell upon one of the champion's friends? The ghost scolded him, pointing at him like he was a child. Not only did you do that, but you caused his son to fly with the champion's friend. You are a disgusting person. Cloud smiled at the ghost gratefully. Thank you, sir, Cloud told the ghost, who blushed bashfully. Severus then took out his own wand and took out Cloud's blade from the now broken table, placing it on the floor gently before repairing the table with a quick spell. Cloud, throwing your precious sword like that was dangerous, Severus scolded him, and Cloud shot him a wicked grin. It is dangerous, but he put my beloved son in danger, so dash. You reacted without thinking? Possibly, Cloud grinned, putting Red down first because he wanted out of his hold, but he kept holding Harry, who was giggling at 2 adults talking with each other. And if I didn't give that man a second chance, then I would have reported him for child abuse. He should be thankful I purposefully missed his head. Excuse me, gentlemen, Minerva interrupted the pair, causing them to look at her. Young Harry hasn't been sorted yet, and he was about to tell us what his new last name was before dash. She glared at Dumbledore, causing the oldest man to cower, and was blushing darkly, and Cloud guessed he was embarrassed of what he had just done. Was interrupted. I'd like for Harry to be sorted into his house, and we can set up a room for your stay. He nodded his head before letting Harry down to walk back over to her, so he could tell her his and his name. My name is now Harry Strife, not Potter, ma'am. As soon as his son had said his name, the great dining hall went into an uproar, which Cloud wasn't expecting, but was pleased to see. Half the hall was clueless, especially most of the teachers. The girl who had talked to his son on the train got up from the table, even though most were trying to stop her from leaving the table. She walked over to him and looked Cloud dead in the eyes and asked, "Are you the ancient hero who saved the planet?" Cloud couldn't help but smile at the tiny brunette with curly hair. She was very smart for her young age. Yes, it is true, but it wasn't just me who saved the planet long ago. He patted her on the head. My friends did too, even if they're mostly gone now. I didn't believe that fairy tale was real. When my grandma would tell me that story as a tiny kid, she admitted, blushing with shame, I always believed the story wasn't true. I now know I was truly wrong. It's okay, Hermione, Harry called from where he was, causing the girl to look at him. You didn't know, which is completely all right. Dad wanted people to believe his story was a myth anyway. I think we stalled enough, young Mr. Strife. It's time for you to be sorted, Minerva told his son calmly while holding the hat. Harry nodded and got on the stool. As soon as the hat was placed on his head, Harry could hear another voice beside his own was inside his head. Young one, would you allow me access to your mind? I need to see in your mind to be able to place you in your correct house. Who are you? Harry asked curiously. I am the Sorting Hat. I may sound different within your mind than I do on the outside, even though I am old looking on the outside. All right, I'll allow you to look through my mind. Thank you, young Strife. After a while, the hat begins to speak again. To be honest, you could fit in any of the 4 houses. Your courage to stand in for what you believe is right, like a Gryffindor. You are also cunning for trying to get your goals accomplished like a Slytherin, you are loyal to your friends and family like a Hufflepuff, and you are even as intelligent as any Ravenclaw. Between the four, there are only two that stand out the most are Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw. Which one do you prefer out of the two? I'd go with Hufflepuff. I don't like studying much and love to relax and pull pranks like my Uncle Zach. Plus, I like to exercise. If you're sure, Hufflepuff. The Hufflepuff table went wild as soon as his house was called, after Miss McGonagall took the hat off his head. His dad grabbed his weapon off the ground and put it back onto his bike before grabbing his bike and wheeled it next to the door next to a man with long hair and was holding a very beautiful cat. He looked nervous as his dad put his bike next to him. Harry waited for his father before he went over to the Hufflepuff table. After his dad sat down, stealing the spot next to Neville, he decided to sit on his dad's lap, ignoring the grunt from his father as he did so. That's where he met an older boy named Cedric Diggory, who was 2 years his senior, and Cho Chang, who was only a year ahead of him. They talked as food appeared before them, but Harry nor his father ate any because they didn't trust it, and there wasn't anything they could recognize since both weren't fond of many sugary foods, and also Harry's sugar intake was over the bar for the day. But he and his dad knew that Auntie Aerith would feed them later regardless. They ignored the stares they got from the table alone. Once the food was gone and the old man who threw him and read across the hall started to speak, which they ignored everything he had to say. When it was nearing possibly midnight, those who were proclaimed prefects called all first years to them. But Harry refused to listen, wanting to stay with his father. Once the hall was cleared of the students, Miss McGonagall and Mr. Snape walked over to the both of them. I am going to say this now, but I will be staying here every year until Harry graduates. After that incident, I don't feel that it's safe to be here without me. His father spoke as he stared at the pair. The other teachers seemed to want to talk to them too, but thought better of it along with that old fart because they all left the hall. Also, I want Harry to be with me during his stay. If he changes his mind later on in the next few years, then he'll join the others in Hufflepuff, but for now I don't want him out of my sight. That old geezer already ruined my introduction plans by throwing my child, and I don't trust him near my boy. That is acceptable. I would do the same as you if it were my own child that was put in such a dangerous situation, and I would have taken them out of Hogwarts immediately afterwards. But thank you, Mr. Strife, for giving our school a second chance. Miss McGonagall told him with a gentle smile. A room will be ready for you in a few days. Severus will be taking you both into his own room temporarily until it's done. After that, they parted ways, and Harry stayed close to his father's leg with Red close behind them as they went to Mr. Snape's room, and once inside with the doors locked and a silence charm so no one outside the room could hear them talk. His aunt and uncle appeared in the room. His uncle gave Harry and Red food to eat while his aunt went off about how cruel the headmaster was towards Red and endangering Harry in the process. His father also agreed with them and told them he had half a mind to pull Harry out and put him in a better school. They all were snapping and cussing out the headmaster way into the night. Harry let out a yawn and fall asleep on Mr. Snape's couch with Red curled against it. Chapter 6. Albus wasn't too happy with the night's events. He wanted that man gone, but he couldn't because of his own freaking mistake of almost harming Harry along with that red lion-looking creature. Instead of going to his office, he went straight to the library to look for the story that everyone in the wizarding world and muggle alike thought was just fictional and wasn't a true tale, but now it was confirmed to be true. It took him until near dawn to find the book and left a note for Madame Prince about taking the book and how long he planned to take it before going to his office to study the tale. As soon as he got there, he was met with Minerva, who was waiting for him, probably to discuss what happened last night and to scold him for his behavior in front of all the students. Minerva, you've wanted to speak to me about my actions last night? He questioned as they entered the stairway that moved up to his office after giving the statue the password. Even though your behavior was disgusting by all means, and I worry about the children telling their parents about it, pulling them out of the program and sending them elsewhere. But no, I came here to get the students' daily schedules and to report on Mr. Strife's decision that involves young Harry, she told him, nodding to the pictures of previous headmasters. Ah, what has he decided? Albus was a bit nervous inside and worried that Harry would get out of clutches again after he was taken in by Strife. Lucky for you, Mr. Strife decided to keep Harry enrolled, but if it happens again, he'll be taking Harry out as well as press charges for harming his child, she reported to him, making him feel relieved that Strife was given him a second chance. But he requests to stay every school year from now on to make sure Harry stays safe here, as well have him share the same room, unless Harry wants to room with the other Hufflepuffs when he's older. That's completely fine with me as long as Harry is safe and protected. He was lying about the safe and protected part, but it did convince her enough to make her leave after getting all the schedules for the students for her house and to give the other heads of house schedules to give to their own students. As she left, he started to read the book. It talked about Strife saving the planet from the son of the calamity known as Genova long ago. Since it was an old book, some things were missing, such as who was the calamity's son, and had very little information about what he did and how it was possible. Though it did have information about the planet itself, such as it having its own source of life energy and the long-extinct human race called Cetras who helped the planet at the start of its own birth. But there was no information about Strife's past besides saving the planet. Letting out a huff, Albus carefully closed the book and sent Fawkes to ask for the same book, but one not falling apart from flourish and blots with gallons in a bag on his leg before sending him off. Now he had to get to work on a plan to get that Strife man out of his school. Harry was eating his breakfast that he was all too pleased to eat to have a good meal in the Great Hall. The house elves, from what he heard from his father, had been so distressed after they hadn't eaten their food for dinner while he slept on Mr. Snape's couch. But after talking to them that Harry and himself weren't big on sugary foods and have a limit on their sugar intake, they calmed down and now knew to put healthy food options on the tables for them alone. After Harry finished eating his food, he started to do push-ups, causing people to stare at him. He stopped when he got his schedule for the rest of the school year from his head of house, which was a lovely plump lady called Professor Sprout. He looked it over with his first friend Neville. They had their first 2 periods free, but they had charms afterwards which they shared with Ravenclaw, then another free period, and lastly shared a class with Slytherin in History of Magic. Harry was disappointed that his day was going to be mostly free, but at least he could go around with Neville to go find each class without being confused where to go later for the whole week. Hermione came over to them and showed her own schedule, so they'd know where she was and when she'd be free. She had no class in the first period like them, but had defense against the dark arts in the second period with Gryffindor. Her third period was charms with them, her fourth period was with Gryffindor again, but the class was magical theory, and her final period was free. She did complain that they had so much free time during their first day, but Harry told her he was not going to be lazy during those periods to ease her mind. But she gave him a look of unbelief before the three of them decided to use the first free period together, getting to know where each of their classes were at by themselves without an adult accompanying them. Though Red was going to be with them regardless. They explored most of the castle and got scolded by Filch for running around, but let it slide after Red explained that they were just children and just wanted to know the layout of the school to know where each of their classes were. Filch must have liked Red a lot because he let them do their own thing afterwards. By the time they finished finding all their classrooms, Hermione was a minute late for class when they made sure she got to defense against the dark arts class. Harry's scar on his head started to burn when Professor Quirrell turned away from them, but he didn't show his pain to his friends and made a mental note to tell his father about later. During the second period, he and Neville run into the cute blonde boy and his 2 other friends who were also in Slytherin based on the badges they wore. If it isn't the Hufflepuff celebrity and his friend, the blonde boy snarled at him more than at Neville. I am not a celebrity. It would be unfair of me to view myself as such when I myself can't truly remember how I become one. He told him in a monotone voice just like his father. I shouldn't be one to be, honestly. I was just a baby and babies always have uncontrollable magic, so how is it that fair to treat me any differently from anyone else? Even so, it wasn't me who defeated Voldemort. The planet told me the truth of who did, and it was the woman who gave birth to me when she used an ancient spell upon me so I wouldn't die by Voldemort's hands. When he said Tom Riddle's other well-known Voldemort, the 4 of them flinched from him saying it out loud. Harry, how can you easily decide that it wasn't you who defeated you-know-who? Neville asked, looking at him with a concerned tone. Because of 2 reasons. I was just a baby and don't really remember it. The second one is because my aunt has been teaching me how to communicate with the planet since I could read, and I do plan to continue to do her work when I finish school. I didn't want to come here, but I don't regret coming here to meet you, Harry told him honestly with a smile on his face, and Neville looked surprised at what he said, and looked about to cry after Harry said he didn't regret coming to Hogwarts to meet him. Neville started to cry and hugged Harry, unable to speak as he sobbed into the other's shoulder. The other 3 boys felt extremely awkward watching this go down, and then the third period bell went off warning them it was time to go to Charms where they'll see Hermione. Come on, Neville, it's time for Charms, Harry sang out, patting Neville's back in a comforting gesture, leading the boy away from the other boys. Walking through the halls was very boring, so Cloud decided to hang out with the half-giant Hagrid while Harry was in class. He knocked on Hagrid's hut, which needed upgrading badly, Once Hagrid opened the door, the half-giant gave him a warm smile. Cloud offered to fix up his living space, even going so far as offering to tell him all about the Chocobo birds as to allow Hagrid to accept his offer easier, which the half-giant accepted happily. Hagrid and he chatted throughout the morning, and Fong, who was a boarhound, loved getting pets from Cloud as the blonde worked. The pair were getting close as friends. Cloud told Hagrid all about Chocobos as he worked, and Hagrid told him all about the Forbidden Forest. As soon as noon hit, Hagrid left to go do his daily duties, and Cloud had fixed mostly every broken object in Hagrid's hut when he left to go check on his son to see how he was doing. As he was doing so, he ran into Argus Filch, who was trying to clean up a huge mess all by himself, cursing underneath his breath. Cloud pitied the man and helped him clean up the mess. No questions asked. After he helped finish cleaning the mess, he helped the elder man return the cleaning supplies back to his office. Before Filch could question him, Cloud was already gone as the bell rang, meaning his son would be going to lunch now. He was grateful that Severus provided him the Hufflepuff schedule that morning, or he'd have no clue when his son would be free from his classes. So, he headed to Great Hall and waited for his son to arrive. As he waited, so many of the older students watched him warily, not so sure of his presence. But two of them weren't wary of him at all, but in fact they went straight up to him. "Hey, Mr. Strife," one of them said cheerfully as they approached him. "I'm Fred." "And I'm Gourage. Last night you were really awesome. We wanted to learn how to do what you did." Cloud was amazed how the two twins could be synced so in sync that they'd know each other's words, but he was able to keep up with the duo. "Well, lots of practice and training, but I don't do it to prank others with," he told them, and they looked at him sheepishly. "I do it to protect those I cherish most. Dad." He heard Harry call out towards him, distracting him as his son, and Red run towards him with Harry's friend Neville close behind him, but was being more cautious than Harry was. As Harry got close enough, Cloud scooped him up in his arms. "If you wish to learn what I do, then come back when you have something you want to protect." With that, he left the twins and sat at the Hufflepuff table, listening to everything about Harry's classes and what he did during his free periods. And Neville spoke every now and then, still intimidated by his presence alone, and he was slowly getting used to being near him. Chapter 7. It's been a month since the first day, and Harry was happily eating his food that the house elves made for him and his father, and became friends with most of the wizards and witches, though Professor Quirrell stayed away from both him and his father after Harry told him about the sudden pain feeling in his scar, but only had to deal with Harry in his class. It was Saturday, and all he wanted to do was rest from studying so much. He honestly didn't care about any of the classes besides Charms, Transfiguration, and Herbology. Transfiguration was cool, and Professor McGonagall turning into a cat made him want to become an animagus just like her when he was older. Even his dad was interested in it. Charms was nice to learn magic better, and Professor Flitwick was really the sweetest person he'd ever met. He was also very different than his goblin ancestors. Herbology was his favorite class because it was the closest to helping the planet out, as well as it was the closest thing to his Cetera training, according to his aunt. Currently, as he sat eating his food with his Chocobo egg in his lap to keep it warm, Malfoy and his lackeys decided to walk up to him. He didn't really care much about why the boy was coming towards him in the first place. It was already known that Slytherins and Hufflepuffs get along with each other better than the other houses, so he wasn't at all worried about him. And if Malfoy came up to just bully him, Red was literally laying down by his feet. "Strife," he greeted the other with a sigh in his tone, causing Harry to look at him as he waved his lackeys away after spotting Red at Harry's feet, and they did leave to go eat the sweets at the other end of the table. Malfoy. "Hello, what do I owe this pleasure of speaking with you?" He smiled at the platinum blonde boy. Red just gave the boys a look before stretching and leaving the pair for a little while. "You can call me Draco, Strife," the boy told him as he sat down next to the raven-haired boy. "As you can call me Harry in return." Harry grinned as he passed some rolls to Draco, so the other could have something in his stomach besides just sweets. "Thanks." Draco smiled at him in turn and took one of the rolls from the bowl. "I wanted to say, sorry since our first interaction wasn't the nicest. I'm also sorry it took me a month to apologize for my behavior. Studying hasn't been all that great, to be honest, and I wanted to know how to apologize to you properly, and asked my mom for advice, since my father isn't the best at helping with this type of stuff. It's okay. I forgive you." He gave him a soft smile as he finished eating and got up from his seat carefully with the Chocobo egg in hand. Would you like to come with me to mine and my father's shared room? Is it all right for me to even be in there? Draco questioned, getting up a few minutes after Harry did. It should be fine as long as you can keep a secret once you're inside. Harry giggled, leading the way as the egg in his arms wiggled a little bit. They walked for a while before coming to a painting of a guy who looked scary and wore black and red clothing, with a gun on his side. Harry smiled at his father's oldest friend before speaking out the password to open the door to the room in a different language to where Draco wouldn't understand. The host of chaos. May I have an entrance? The man in the picture nodded his head and the picture swung open. Both boys entered the hole leading into a bigger room which was basically a mini-house. His Uncle Zach could be heard in the bathroom singing to himself. Harry always wondered why his uncle bathed when he didn't really need to. I thought it was only you and your dad? Draco looked at Harry confused, and Harry let out a small giggle. That's why I said, keep a secret, and to answer your question, it's not just my dad and I. It's also my uncle and aunt that randomly visit when they're not too busy with their duties involving the livestream. Harry told him as he sat down on the black leather couch. Draco hesitated at first before sitting down next to him. I never heard of the livestream before, Draco admitted as he watched the egg in Harry's lap wiggle. What is the livestream? The livestream is the lifeblood of the planet, Harry explained as his uncle walked in the living room without a shirt on and ignored Draco and patted Harry's head before disappearing in a light green and white streams of light coming from the ground, which Draco thought it almost looked like the killing curse but squeaked out when the black-haired male disappeared. Sorry about my uncle. He isn't really the brightest cookie between him and my aunt. He just went back to the livestream to do his duty as one of the heroes of the planet. My dad's the chosen champion of the planet, and it refused to let him die because the planet isn't ready to lose its champion, Harry explained as a house elf appeared with healthy treats for the both of them before disappearing again. I want to be like my aunt though. We wizards are basically Cetra, like when she was alive millions and millions of years ago before the planet went through a reset. This is so confusing, Draco sighed as he put his hands on his face, as the information he received was making his head hurt. Oh, sorry about that, he sheepishly told him while rubbing the back of his head. I tend to do an accidental information dump. I just get a bit too excited about becoming a Cetra like my aunt when I'm all grown up. I'm currently being taught by her to talk to the planet and understand the planet. So where is your dad? I haven't seen him since last night, Draco asked, trying to change the topic off of the livestream, though he made a mental note to look into it himself when he was able to. Oh, he had things to do though. He'll be back on Monday night. Don't know why he left in a hurry though, he told him as the egg started wobbling more aggressively, causing Harry to let out an excited squeal as cracks began to sound from the egg. It's hatching. Harry gently put the egg on the couch before getting off the couch to kneel beside the couch to watch the egg. So, what you gonna call it, after it hatches? Draco asked as he also joined Harry in watching the egg hatch, curious what type of creature it was. The name I've picked for them is June, and I hope they like it too, and the species is called Chocobo, he explained quietly and quickly, but before Draco could question him. A bright yellow beak pressed through the shell of the egg, and it made a quack sound before pulling its beak back into the shell. There was even more cracking sounds, then top half of the shell broke up off and a featherless bird head popped out, and it cawed a few times, causing Harry to giggle and get up to get the baby Chocobo baby food his dad made before he left. Draco carefully took the baby bird creature into his hands carefully. His mom had taught him how to take care of newborn peacocks carefully since they were fragile as soon as they were born. He had a feeling Chocobos were the same since they were birds as well. His mother was the one who mainly took care of him, as well as his family's house elf Dobby. He had only learned to be an actual pure blood when his dad was around. Now that he was thinking of his mom and dad, he realized that they taught him different things, and what his dad had been teaching him was all wrong. Seeing how Harry was so happy with his adoptive father made him question how his father was with him. Harry's father was kind, brilliant, and very quiet, compared to his own father, who was demanding, strict, and always scolded him even if he so much as made a single tiny mistake without trying to correct him or never even telling him what he did was wrong. He actually wanted to cry, but due to his training as a pure blood he couldn't really cry. The little bird in his hands nuzzled into his chest, causing him to look down at the tiny creature. Seeing how the tiny creature was already comfortable with him holding the small creature, maybe, just maybe he can learn over time that his father's views weren't really what he wanted for himself.
This is the end of part 2. See you all soon.